The last time that tie was driving me crazy, so I had to put on some new clothes. Actually, I'm in a totally new place and a whole new time. It just shows you the amazing things about technology. But David Hume is the philosopher we're talking about. And remember from the last lecture, what we were looking at was the idea of the association of ideas. And remember that David Hume made the point that ideas are associated based in certain ways. Things that look like each other, he says, we associate. That's the idea of resemblance. When we associate the cause and effect, if I hit myself in the head, I will associate that with a thump in the head or pain. So we associate ideas based on cause and effect. We also associate ideas based on contiguity, things that are next to each other. But the most important thing about David Hume, always remember, is that every idea must be derived from an impression. And Hume asks again and again, from what supposed impression was that idea derived? And if the answer is, I have no impression from which that idea was derived, then that idea is truly nonsense. And one of the ideas that Hume has demonstrated is actually nonsense, even though we depend upon it tremendously, is the idea of cause and effect. And this is one of the most important things that Hume did. He says, from what supposed impression was that idea derived cause and effect? I think if I hit something, my hitting it causes the effect that happens. If I hammer a nail with a hammer, I believe that the smashing of the hammer against the head of the nail drives the nail into the board, but do I have an impression of that? And he investigates. He says, first, I absolutely do have an impression of every single time I hit the hammer with the nail, it seems to drive it in. And he says, that's constant conjunction. Constantly conjoined. Constant conjunction. I also have an impression, so that's one thing I do have an impression of. I also have an impression that they have to get really, really close to each other. So that nail never drives into the board until the hammer touches it. So I have an impression of contiguity between the cause and the supposed effect. So they have to touch. Again, that word contiguity. Contiguity. They have to be contiguous. Contiguity. And three, not only do they two always seem to come together, is one have to get right next to the other, you never have the effect happen before the cause. So there always has to be first the cause, then the effect. The nail goes into the board. You never have the nail go into the board and then the hammer come down. That would be really fun if that could happen, but it only happens on TV and videos if I turn this backwards. In real life, always the cause, then the effect, and so he calls that priority in time. I do have an impression of priority in time. Priority in time. First cause, then effect. However, am I absolutely certain that there's something that makes the cause create the effect? And he says, this is the impression that's missing. I have no impression whatsoever of a necessary connection. Necessary connection does not exist. No impression of necessary connection between cause and effect. Every single time I see the cause, the effect happens, but I can't see them connected. So what is it makes me think that one event really causes another? Maybe they're entirely arbitrary. Maybe they're entirely separate. And he says, the reason why I believe if I throw this pen at that video machine that is going to hit it is because every single time I've thrown something and hit something, an effect has occurred. So it's really only our habit, and what he calls the habit of association. That's what allows us to believe, and we don't know, that's what allows us to believe that the cause actually creates the effect. I habitually associate the effect with the cause, but I have no absolute impression that one event causes another. And this is a shocking thing for the history of science. That means right now, we don't have any idea that there's any real cause and effect. At best, it's a likely or highly probable cause that creates the effect. And you've seen this in statistics all the time. You can never know through statistical evaluation whether a correlation is equivalent to causation. All you know that these things happen together a lot. And that's one of the things that Hume has demonstrated. That we often jump to the conclusion that a correlation is a causation when we have no impression that the first event caused the second. The cigarette companies for years, for example, said things like, well, people who are going to get cancer anyway are the ones who smoke. It's not like smoking causes cancer, they're just correlated. But it took a lot of information and evidence to say, even now, that it's just highly, highly, highly likely that cigarettes cause cancer, because still we can't show that cause. It's just a high degree of associative similarity. One always follows the other. We see it again and again. It's a simple our habit to associate the cause and the effect. Well, there's the story of cause and effect with David Hume, and with that we will turn to the problem of the self, because you know what? You don't even know if you are you.